Welcome back, everyone. We have a mammoth of a topic to discuss in this video. It's so huge, I'm going to have to give you the truncated version, but I promise, if you watch until the end, you'll never forget it. And yes, all of these puns have relevance because this video is about elephants. Surah 105 reads, "Have you not seen how your Lord did with the companions of the elephant? Did he not make their plot go astray? He sent against them birds and flocks, which were pelting them with stones of baked clay. He made them like chewed-up husks of straw." If I gave you these verses from the Quran, said that I had no idea what they were talking about, and asked you to make up a backstory, I'm sure you could. And with elephants, birds, and clay stones, I'm sure you could come up with a really good backstory. I will tell one such backstory to you, adapted and altered slightly for humor from Ayman Ibrahim's A Concise Guide to the Life of Muhammad, right from Muslim sources. Now, as I tell this very shorthand account to you, I'm going to leave Surah 105 on the screen because I want you to see, even with such a briefly summarized version of the story I'm giving to you, how much Muslims read between the lines of the Quran when they're making up their own backstory. Are you ready? Cue the reverb and the voices droning in the background. Abraha was a 6th century Christian king of Yemen who had always wanted a pet elephant that he could feed and ride every day. He also liked to build cathedrals, so he did just that. His beautiful cathedral was a long distance from Mecca, where Arabs, some of whom were called the Quraysh, would perform their pilgrimage to a pagan shrine. After building his cathedral, Abraha decreed that the Quraysh should make their pilgrimages over 600 miles to his cathedral instead. One of the Quraysh was so angry that he went all the way to Yemen and defiled the cathedral. Abraha was angry, but his elephant dream finally came true. The king of Ethiopia sent some resources to Abraha, including elephants, giant African elephants. So Abraha saddled up his elephant and led his army in a charge up to Mecca to destroy that pagan shrine called the Kaaba. Victory seemed certain because the first part of the battle went so well for Abraha and his elephant army. Okay, forget it. We're not even at verse 2 in Surah 105 yet, so I'm going to skip the rest and just get to the backstory of verse 2. Here we go. As the army approached the pagan Kaaba, Muhammad's grandfather declared, conveniently and predictably, almost as if on cue, that the only one who could save the Kaaba was Allah. And so as Abraha's elephant approached, within a clay stone's throw of the Kaaba, it knelt down on its elephant knees. It would go any direction except toward the Kaaba. This is odd because it had been traveling in the direction of the Kaaba the whole time. Abraha admonished the elephant, then he told his elephant he wouldn't let him mate with the other girl elephants, and then finally he struck the elephant many times. You see what I did there? If not, go back a couple of seconds, listen again, and if you still don't get it, just let me know in the comment section. Verse 3. Allah caused birds to drop deadly clay balls. Apparently, lots of the pagan soldiers were dumb enough to look up at the sky for a long time as these deadly pebbles were raining down because they noticed that each bird carried 3 pebbles, 2 for the feet and 1 for the beak. Anyway, the stones fell on the elephant armies and a bunch of people died and the pagan shrine was saved. The end. And that is the story of the year of Muhammad's birth, right from the Quran. However, Professor Ayman Ibrahim directs us to the work of scholar Daniel Beck, who studies the traditional Muslim claims about this story and argues that Surah 105 is better understood as a reflection of a Syriac Christian tradition that was known during Muhammad's time. So let's see what Daniel Beck says, and as it turns out, he's pretty straightforward. The traditional Islamic interpretation of Surah 105 as reminding a Meccan audience of a conflict in the town's recent history suffers from severe problems at every level, and here are some samples of those problems. It's incongruous for Surah 105 to glory in the destruction of the Ethiopian Christians. Why would Allah intervene to save church-burning polytheists from Christians? And why would Surah 105 be recited to remind Muhammad's Meccan followers about an episode when Allah had recently saved the polytheists by slaughtering people of the book? Also, there's no contemporary historical evidence of any attack on Mecca with or without elephants, and there's no record of Abraha's conflict with a Quraysh or with a pilgrimage to the Kaaba in Mecca, nor is there any contemporary record of how Abraha died. And there are also bigger issues. He notes that if Ethiopians sent elephants to be used in a Hijazi punitive expedition in the 6th century, it would be the first known use of African elephants in warfare for over 6 centuries, and the last. Also, no contemporary record in South Arabia, or any other literate region from Ethiopia through Persia, shows the slightest awareness of Abraha's alleged expedition or its demise. Indeed, contemporary sources display no awareness of the Quraysh or Mecca more generally. And finally, Lamens and Conrad long ago showed that the chronology, which seeks to tie Muhammad's birth to the year of the elephant, is defective and artificial. So there are just some reasons to believe that pious Muslims have, once again, made up stories to fill in the many gaps that the Quran is so well known for. So that's the negative side, what didn't happen. What about the constructive side? What's actually going on here? Daniel Beck points to Maccabean themes widely circulated across the Near East. He says these themes were repetitively invoked across diverse contexts because they depict an idealized soteriological model in which a community of believers is assaulted and oppressed by overwhelming pagan forces until the Lord miraculously intervenes to save his servants. Beck then goes on to compare several accounts that use this idealized soteriological model. In the books of 2nd and 3rd Maccabees, it looks like this. A king devises an evil plan to use elephants to annihilate pious believers, and then, you guessed it, divine deliverance ruins the aggressor's plans. This basic, unadorned form, contra the mammoth story in the Muslim accounts, is directly parallel to verses 1 and 2 of Surah 105. Beck notes that the popularity of these Maccabean stories explains the assumption that the original audience of this surah already knew the story. So there's nothing that hints that this surah should be read with pre-Islamic Mecca in the background. Rather, the subtext of this story points far north. How ironic that the pious Muslim fiction about the year of Muhammad's birth directs us south to Abraha in Yemen, a long way in the opposite direction, a long way from the truth. Now let's talk about verse 4, which refers to the stones of baked clay, or sijil. To ascertain the meaning of this word, Beck looks to other uses in the Quran. He notes, Quranic use of this noun connotes an authoritative physical writing issued by a distant celestial sovereign. In Surah 21, we see this word used in a phrase that's translated scroll for records. Beck asserts that the point of these unusual words was to signify a tangible medium of a royal writing. Other uses of this word in the Quran confirm that verse 4 of Surah 105 is the way that the Quran refers to judgments that are inscribed and hurled down from heaven. As an example, here's Surah 11, where you see this additional detail. So when our command came, we turned it upside down and rained on it stones of baked clay, one after another, and here it is, marked in the presence of your Lord. This marking signifies that judgment is inevitable. So that's the meaning of these clay stones, and finally, to these supposed flocks of birds who carried them. Beck says, in the parallel language in these references, angelic messengers rain down the stones of Sijil, not birds. The biblical stories about the destruction of Lut's city do not mention birds, nor do Maccabean scriptures. Why this curious difference between these 4 Quranic uses of almost identical punishment language? The answer is simple. There is no difference. All 4 uses of the same punishment language should be understood the same way, as relating the Lord's devastating judgments that his heavenly messengers delivered upon the wicked oppressors. So this surah makes sense compared to contemporary stories circulating in the Near East. It's a standard account of sacred history. There's nothing unique. But of course the background wouldn't have anything to do with the king of Yemen saddling up some elephants and fighting against Mecca. It's interesting how Muslim fabricators lifted this common form of a story from its original context and gave it a new one. Did I mention one of the names of the elephants? It was Mahmud. Yeah, the many coincidences in this story are so striking because they're fake. Well, it sure did make a good fairy tale about the year of Muhammad's birth. And as always, we're left to wonder what else Muslim scholars made up. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.